two things that struck me. Let's start with Michael. I was really struck because I saw behind-the-scenes footage that, I didn't get to see. Did you notice how his first year in the NBA, he's a kid, and it's a bad team, and it's a bad roster, and it's a bunch of cokeheads, but how refined and how polished and how smart. Third practice in, he established himself as the guy among 28-year-old veterans who had made a lot of money. Michael was very polished, and that's what happens when you go to a university and you hang out with people that are interested in a lot of things. And Michael Jordan loved college. And between his good parents, his great coach, Dean Smith, and the college experience, Michael came out of college refined and smart and polished and capable a month in of being a superstar in the league. The NBA's latest model does not project that way. They want you to go high school to G League and play for the Fort Wayne Mad Ants and a D-level coach. And I've said this before, I don't expect high school guys to go to college for 4 years because the money's too great, and I like to get guys paid too. But the idea there's no value for Zion to go to Duke. You watched that last night. Michael Jordan was ready to be not only physically but emotionally ready to be the star. And that's parents, and that's Dean Smith, and that's the college experience. I don't understand marginalizing it, that it has no value. I've never understood that. It is a wonderful 6-month platform to take a young man and say, we're going to mature you up a little bit. You're going to be around global citizens. We're going to give you, now we know the team's not great, but we're going to prop you up and let people see you. And I think Kentucky for a year is better than the Rio Grande Valley Vipers for 6 months. Even though you're not going to get money, I just think it's a better experience. So I was really impressed by how refined Michael was. The second thing is, as Twitter is prone to do, there was all this sympathy for Scottie Pippen, and, this is terrible, his contract. Now, first of all, Scottie grew up, his dad had a stroke, and his brother got paralyzed in junior high or high school. It really, I got a soft spot for Scottie Pippen. I covered him in Portland. But let's not go crazy here. The owner of the Chicago Bulls told Scottie, do not sign this contract. You don't want to sign an 8-year contract. Scottie did. Secondly, Scottie was underpaid. Okay, Michael Jordan was more underpaid. Michael Jordan signed an 8-year, $25 million contract in 1988. It lasted to 1996. And I want you to think about this. That's the best player in the world. And he was the best player in the world halfway through his rookie season. So for 7.5 years, he won 4 titles, 4 finals MVPs, 3 regular season MVPs, 6 scoring titles. And you think Scottie was underpaid? Michael Jordan carried the league. Remember this. Forget about the Chicago Bulls. As Joy pointed out, they were less popular than an indoor soccer team in town. And overnight, they talked about this last night, fill the arena. You could go. Barack Obama's like, he goes, I didn't have any money. I couldn't afford to go. But they were charging $3 to go, and suddenly it was $20 to sit up in the rafters. So he not only made the Bulls rich, the league it just exploded with Michael. Everywhere Michael went, I'm by the end of year 1, everywhere he went. So listen, Scottie was underpaid, and his very modest childhood looks like they didn't grow up with much money. It's really amazing. Like Michael Jordan's the most underpaid athlete ever. And I know that sounds absolutely crazy, but can you imagine like take anybody, take a Joe Burrow, winning 4 Super Bowls and 4 MVPs, any of these young rookies, and not getting, now the NFL's kind of got it slotted. Here's what you make. But I understand the sympathy for Scottie in his life, but the Bulls tried to talk him out of it, and Michael's contract was brutal. Now, Michael had enormous shoe revenue, but, still, and sometimes and this happens a lot in life, where sometimes you get paid for what you've done. I think if you own a team, it's smarter to pay people for what they'll give you, not what they've done. But in the end, Michael was very well compensated, and so was Scottie. He just had to move. There's been a story out there regarding that Michael Jordan would not let these tapes out. And then he watched LeBron holding a trophy in Akron, in Cleveland. And Michael's got an enormous brand. And, he's thinking, I don't want this to ding my brand. People are starting to say LeBron's the greatest of all time. And I asked Ahmad Rashad, Michael's friend, are these reports true? There is some sense that, LeBron is starting to get elevated. I mean, we never talked about LeBron better than Jordan. All of a sudden, he comes back on the Warriors 3-1. He's unstoppable. He wins in Cleveland. Everybody starts talking about that. Maybe that's the best player. Is that, I asked Ahmad Rashad, why MJ decided, okay, let's let the tapes go?
Not at all. Not even that's the furthest thing from his mind. His whole attitude about this whole thing is, you know what? I did what I did, and there it is. You can decide whatever you want where that stands. There's no competitive feeling in him about, who was better, or there's no competition between him and LeBron, none whatsoever. You can't draw him into any sort of conversation like that. The way he comes back and said, you can't compare eras. Is that there's no way that you can compare eras, and you can't. And he said, plus, we're never going to play one-on-one. So what? It's just a sports conversation about, one person saying this guy was the greatest, the other person saying that guy was the greatest. But that's what sports is all about.
The other thing is, because of social media now, you can actually tweet LeBron James or tweet Damian Lillard. Back then, it was I could tweet any sportscaster, any music star. I could tweet Mark Cuban, the owner of an NBA team. I could tweet Adam Silver. Back when Michael played, there was no social media. You didn't have the availability. Not all the games were on television. So, when Michael came into your town, you'd seen him on the national game of the week, but you didn't get every Bulls game all the time. And frankly, you didn't have social media to connect with him. So there is stars felt a little more special. I mean, Joy and I live not that far from Hollywood. I can go to a restaurant, Craig's, in Hollywood. I can see Tom Hanks. I mean, Tom Hanks is on Twitter. Tom Hanks is on Instagram. I get little bits and pieces of Tom Hanks every day. And you can see him out in public. But sometimes with Jordan, I'm watching the footage last night, and it was like, he came from the mountains. A lot of people are like, this is the only time in my life I'm going to see Michael Jordan. People, you forget the world we lived in. When Michael Jordan broke into this league, NBA players flied commercial. You were on the same flight, potentially, as Scottie Pippen. Can you imagine being on a flight in the 70s and early 80s, sitting next to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar? I mean, guys flied commercial. It's just crazy. That means some of your players, Phil Jackson, 6'7", when he broke into this league, he had to fly coach. Phil Jackson was flying coach. Coach? The guys got their own private jet lines now. I really like the documentary. There's a couple of reasons. Because for me and people that grew up with it, it's just great to go back down memory lane. It's really fun. A lot of the stories I know, a couple of them I didn't, but it's fun. I also think it's really cool. John Goulet's telling me this morning, younger people are like, yeah, I didn't know half of this stuff. I just knew they were great. So it's really cool. Like, we're all collectively, I'm reminiscing. Younger people are seeing stuff for the first time. I think it's a really communal experience that we're all enjoying. And I will say this. We tend to, we tend to create sort of, we romanticize the past a little bit too much. The guys in the old days, they all hated each other, and guys today are now all friends. Oh, really? So Danny Ainge and Michael Jordan are golfing on a day off. The star of the Bulls and a star of the Celtics are golfing during the playoff series. Yeah, they didn't hate each other. Magic and Bird, really close friends. By the way, Magic and Isaiah for years, really close friends. First of all, a lot of guys back then, they played cards, they golfed, they had fun, they chased it. They drank, they smoked cigars together, off-season, and probably in season. The difference is this. Today's players are all paid well. The salary cap used to be closer to $25 million. Now it's well over $100 million. It'll be $200 million in 5, 6, 7 years. The bottom line now, when you sit down at the dinner table, anybody listening to my show that grew up in a big family, and maybe you grew up in a big family and your folks didn't have a ton of money, and, you know, they'd hand out dinner and you were sitting there saying, I got to get a roll. Because if I don't fight for the roll, I'm not getting a roll. And there's 7 kids, and I want to make sure I get that pork chop. And, oh, that pie, I got to fight for my legitimate piece of the pie. That used to be the old NBA. I mean, Michael Jordan was underpaid for 7 years. Scottie was underpaid. The stars were underpaid on the dynasty. Wins equaled revenue. Everybody was fighting for a very small financial pie. Now, Otto Porter's rich. Everybody's rich. We're paying $20 million a year for guys. And so everybody gets a second dessert. Everybody gets a third roll. Everybody gets a fourth piece of meatloaf. So it's not as desperate. You know, in life, if everybody gets a little more comfortable financially, there's not quite as much that doesn't mean they're not competitive, but there's not quite as much desperation. And so the players today, if you put Michael and Scottie was making $27 million a year, not $2.2 million a year, you know what? He wouldn't have been so angry at the GM. He may not have liked him, but there wouldn't be this. And guys are different than women sometimes on this. We're all about the respect and are we being shown love and our egos. You know, I get it. But it's just a different world. A lot of guys back then got along. And by the way, you think Patrick Beverley's buddies now with rivals? You think Rondo is? Seriously, you think Kawhi wants to be buddies? Giannis is like, I don't want to be buddies with anybody. Blake Griffin doesn't get along with players. There's all sorts of guys in the NBA that do not want to buddy. Westbrook says his best friend's the ball. There are teammates he won't talk to. So this idea that current players are all softies and old guys are all tough, you know, it was a different world. A lot of friends back then, a lot of guys that don't want to talk to other guys now.